Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Ed Tiryakian, also known as Ed T. Ed is a seasoned investment banker and private equity executive. He's advised professional athletes, launched multiple successful ventures, and led multi-million-dollar transactions across banking, sports, and tech. He has worked with top firms and high-profile clients, including the NBA and NFL athletes, serving as both a financial strategist and agent. He's a graduate of Duke University and the Fuqua School of Business, previously the managing director of Paine Webber and UBS, and the chairman of Legend Sports Group. He's a frequent contributor to Forbes, the Business Journal, the Messenger, and the Wall Street Journal, and he's also the managing director of the PE firm Argentum Group. I feel hugely honored to speak to Ed T today. He's actually a professor in an entrepreneurship class that I take at Duke University, so I'm particularly excited to hear his insights. So, Ed, I wanted to get started by asking you about the world of entrepreneurship and asking you, is it for everybody?
I think deep down, more people have that animal spirit than they realize. And if I have the chance in a class at Duke to unleash that animal spirit of the entrepreneur, that's my mission. And that's why I teach this class. Duke is very blessed to have some incredible students, as you know, as being part of that incredible group of young people that are the best of the best. And the number of entrepreneurial ventures that I've been lucky to either advise or put people in touch with grows every year. And I think what has changed the most is the Stanfords and the Harvards of the world, which dominated this space. You see a school like Duke with an incredibly talented student population catching up very quickly. So I don't know if it's for everyone, but it's for more people than they think.
You mentioned this sort of innate, like, inner spirit. Does that mean that entrepreneurs are born or made? And how do you detect whether you think someone would make a good entrepreneur?
It's a great question. And it gets a little bit to behavioral finance. I do think that there is a certain personality trait that exists in not everyone, but in a lot of people. Some people are born to do it. Some people are risk takers. Some people are never going to be satisfied with the status quo, want to change things, see opportunities. That's sort of the prototypical entrepreneur. But you have another group right under that always asks that question, could I? That ask that question, I want to, but what would stop me? There's the people that are willing to go out of their comfort zone always make the best entrepreneurs. I've seen them, talked to them, seen people start and finish multi-million-dollar companies like the guest speaker we had last night. They are there. And if you remember what Dylan said, started at Goldman Sachs, but knew there was something else out there for him. That's the entrepreneur that I like to unleash, to sort of give them the opportunity, the resources, the vernacular to get something done. Those are the ones that I love to connect with.
And sort of on that basis, like, what makes you think that someone should become one? And do you think they need to get the prior experience at a place like Goldman Sachs, or have a name brand to say that, to tell the world this person is good enough? Or do you think that anyone with an idea listening to this podcast, if they see a gap in the market, if they have the vigor, should just go for it?
Yeah, I would say circumstances dictate a lot. A lot of times it's not the right time. It's not always the right time. And working for the traditional iBanks or working for the traditional financial services, money center banks, it's not a bad thing. It allows you to get your footing. It allows you to sort of see the landscape as you are part of it. But there are a more and more growing group. I think social media has helped us a lot to open it up to more people. I think universities have embraced the entrepreneurial side of things in a much broader scale than was, say, 10 years ago. I think venture capital and private equity as asset classes have grown so much, and fundraising is much more buoyant than it was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That's helping a lot of people find the space, find that little hole, that little wrinkle that they want to fill. And I think that's where you've seen such growth from what I would call non-seasoned entrepreneurs who say, I do have an idea. It is easier to get funding through these accelerators, through these VCs. That's why I think you're such a seismic shift in the growth of the asset class. There are just a lot of good ideas, and we won't get into this on this tape, but AI has unleashed an even bigger group of entrepreneurs who, it's generational. We didn't have AI. I mean, we have AI, but we didn't have AI when I was at Duke. We didn't have AI, for my 20 years at the UBS and Paine Webber. You do. And not only do you have it, you understand it. You understand the coding, you understand the systems. That helps a different group of entrepreneurs capture something that we weren't able to.
Yeah, I would definitely second the point with regard to entrepreneurship, particularly at Duke. I mean, even in my high school and as well as Duke, we started to form groups of students interested in entrepreneurship, building things on campus, instead of these being these sort of loners who, are kind of off by themselves, building something. They actually started to come together. There's also the innovation and entrepreneurship at Duke, kind of like centralizing that more. And I'm sure over time, as there's more successful entrepreneurs, this will have a flywheel effect that will build on top of one another. I think if you went back 30 years ago, not that I was alive, but even just growing up, there was this sort of idea that, you go to the West Coast, you go to a place like Stanford, you go to a place like Harvard, as you said, well, more Stanford so, and you go and you drop out and you build this startup and you go to Silicon Valley. Versus you go to someone like Duke, you go to the Ivy Leagues and you go to Wall Street. They were often seen as these quite separate things, but you've kind of done both in a sense of having gone into the finance realm, gone into the entrepreneurship world. Do you think that Wall Street is a good training zone for entrepreneurship?
Well, from my experience, when I pivoted was 2004, and it was working at UBS, working at Paine Webber, making a lot of coin. It's always a comfort zone where you're sort of doing something, and that was a very good traditional route, which still exists. It's just that I got my master's in finance at Fuqua, and that allowed me to start to pursue deals on not just on the investment banking side, but on the entrepreneurial side, to look at deals that I couldn't look at before because I was sort of boxed in. You really couldn't. If you ran across a deal, and I have a pretty big Rolodex. When you run across deals, I couldn't look at them working at UBS. I'd refer it to someone. And so I wanted the ability in my career to be able to source deals, to look at deals, to advise on deals, which was the pivot that led me out of UBS to Argentum Group. And then, as you know, because I probably bring it up way too much in class, the deal flow that I get is rather incredible. I would say this, Harvey, that yes, Stanford and Silicon Valley is the epicenter of technology. But Harvard and Boston is a big hub. Washington, D.C. and the area is a big hub. Atlanta has become a big hub. Austin has become a big hub. And so whereas you're right, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, geographically you were penned in to what was the traditional Silicon Valley and all the VC firms that were in Silicon Valley, the big ones. That now has morphed into a lot of different areas because deal flow is deal flow. There's a lot of smart tech guys who are across this country, Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Harvard in Boston, MIT. Those became epicenters for technology for those entrepreneurial deals. So money follows success, success follows money. That's the way life is. And so when you see a lot of people making a lot of money in Silicon Valley at Stanford, then which you're right, that's a who's who. of the technology set, that's the same thing happening on the East Coast now, in bigger numbers, by the way.
Now that you transitioned in 2004, that also happened to be the year that I was born. So when you had the
Oh
idea
dear.
for when you had the idea for Argentum Group, I'm sure you had an idea in theory. And the idea in theory, it sounds like, was I want the opportunity to look at deals, source deals, and do what I want with them, as I will, instead of having to put them to someone more junior. But now you've worked in that space for almost or more than 21 years. What was that idea like in theory versus what it's been like in actuality? Why do you think you get so much deal flow? What have you learned about the art of making a deal? And what have you found in your good investments versus differences in your bad investments?
Great, that's a big question, and it's sort of the scope of what we've done. So when 2004, when we started Argentum, it was some people in New York, some people in the West Coast, and some people in Atlanta coming together saying we should be doing more than just coming up with some bonds, underwriting some bonds, helping do asset allocation. There was more to it. So the four of us came together to start this group. We were very fortunate in that we started very quickly with some big deals. And I would say that it wasn't planned. It just happened very quickly that we did some big transactions in our first 2 years. That explains the deal flow. When you have a couple of successful transactions, one was, I think, $3.5 billion, which back then $1 billion was a lot of money. $3.5 billion. One was the purchase of a bank that we took over, that we subsequently merged with another bank. Then people sort of know you in the space. They know that you can get deals done, and that was why we had success early on, which led to a lot of transactions that were asked of us to look at, to advise, to raise money, to help sell. So it's not for everyone has that. That's not a typical road for everyone. We were just very fortunate. But I'll say this too. We were very respected. We weren't like a bunch of young guys that were just say let's do this. We had pretty good reputations. I was pretty high up at UBS. Someone was really high up at Merrill Lynch. Someone was really high up at different firms, and so I think that helped a lot. The good deals versus the bad deals. The bad deals that I've had, which I've shared with the class, they happen, and they are part of learning. Most of the time, it was never that the business model didn't make sense. It was the people executing the business model weren't. I won't say they weren't qualified, but they didn't run it the way that we thought that they should or would. It's always all our bad deals were part of that. We had the financial crisis of 2008, which was devastating to the ecosystem of finance. It wasn't that the market went down, it's just no deals were going to get done. That was a big part of a couple of the deals that didn't quite make it. And then always subsequent to that, COVID. COVID was another reason that a couple of deals sort of dried up in terms of revenue. And so there's certain situations that are going to happen when you're in the finance game, when you are raising money, or when you are starting companies that are hard to see, that are hard to imagine. And in the class that you're in, entrepreneurship, that's one of the things that we discuss. We discuss modeling, and we discuss being ready for things that we didn't see. In your class, there's a group that is doing a startup. It's a clothing startup. Really smart group. They've sourced things. They're going to get fabric from a Latin American country. It's a clothing line being launched. And here comes tariffs. And here comes the market. and here comes dried up capital markets. That happens. Can't really plan for that. Those are sort of one-offs, but the really good deals and the really good deal managers, you can't plan on it, but you can sort of safeguard a little bit. And again, the deals that I've had that were bad, it's just we didn't have enough safeguards in place. But always it comes down, for us, it usually comes down to management. It usually comes down to someone that didn't have either the qualifications or the foresight to see the deal through.
Yeah, I really like your scope on that, because that makes it easy to understand for people who have been in the game, but also people that have never heard about anything about entrepreneurship, and giving them a better scope into the world. I think I was talking to one of my friends the other day about the world of investment banking, and we were talking about like why each company, the two companies merging or one company being acquired, would each need their own investment banking relationship. And we were basically saying that one company company A wants to acquire for company B for the lowest amount possible to make the most money, and then company B wants to be acquired for the most amount of money. And it's similar with the world of entrepreneurship. The investor wants the most equity for the least amount of money, and the company being acquired or bought or selling equity wants the most amount of money with the least amount of equity. On that point, with conflicting viewpoints, conflicting incentives, and I'm sure there are differing ways for the deals that you make. How do you ensure that a deal gets done while you have a differing incentive to the person on the other side, whilst also making it seem like you're friends and that you want the same thing at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's a friendly deal versus a hostile. And I would say that think about our legal system. There's a reason why you have defense lawyers and prosecutors. Now, ultimately, as a country, we all want justice. It's just there's two different lenses as to what justice looks like. In the world of M&A, yes, there's two companies, and if I'm the acquirer, of course I want the cheapest deal. If I'm the investor, I want the biggest stake in the company that I can get for my money. If you're the founder, you want to give up the least equity you can. You think your company is the greatest company in the world, and this person should be honored to give you funding. And that's the push-pull. But by and large, the successful deals are never hostile. I see the benefit in Harvey's company, and I want to be part of it. I just don't want to let Harvey say, Ed, you're going to take it on my terms. What we talk about in class a lot is when you are putting together a deal, you have to justify the price. And if you justify that price, and I go, yep, that makes sense, then you're going to get the terms that you want. If you are Ed with the money, I am going to say, Harvey, please justify that price. I think that's too high. And what could go wrong? And what circumstances haven't you thought about? What's your worst case scenario, not your best case scenario? So it's never, I'm not going to invest money or get investors or put together a deck for someone that I don't like the company. If we're sitting in a room together, there's a good chance that I like you, I like the idea, I like the business model. It's just a question of the details. But again, I hearken back to we all want justice. It's the defense lawyer sees it one way, and the prosecutor sees it another way. That's why so many deals are done in the courts. That it's not a long, drawn out, trial that goes on for years. It's more like, let's just agree. The guy made a mistake, and let's just not punish him too hard. We all agree, let's get it done. It's usually the same way here. And usually, as I'll say this again and again and again, I'm really not going to sit down with you if I either don't like the founder or I think the business idea doesn't work. If I'm sitting down with you, it's probably because I see a lot of what you see. I get the financial impact of what you're doing. So it's life is like that. And again, you want to take the lessons that you learn in life and translate that to the presentation, to the deck that you're showing me, If I don't like the deal at all and you show me a deck, we're just not going to have that next meeting. So it's symbiotic, but again, we're coming at it two different angles. You want my money, which is important. I like your company, but it's still my money that you want. So that's how I think it works.
I think there's something very unique about the world of entrepreneurship in that, by definition, for a first-time founder, everything they do is they're doing it for the first time. Every time, there's a successful breakthrough with their product, or they raise more money, the company's worth more, they increase revenues, cut costs, whatever they do, everything's a first-time thing. And so there's almost a point to which there's a sort of imposter syndrome in who they're in the room with. Because anytime they're pitching investors or new clients, as I said, by definition, they're doing it for the first time. Something I found very interesting about the talk we had yesterday was with regard to him building his own website and pitching his own slides, in that even when he was describing it, even though the final product, his website, the slides he had looked amazing, he was like, behind the surface, we're just spending all this time to make sure it looks really good, and we don't fully know if this website and stuff works yet, but we're just doing what we can. To what extent do you feel that this idea of pitching is an art v science, and what advice would you give to first-time entrepreneurs or people interested in getting into the world of entrepreneurship, but everything just feels so overwhelming because they feel like, no matter what they do, they can't have this perfect thing, and maybe investors want the perfect product?
Yeah, so we've discussed this. Your idea, whatever it is, it's worth more than you think, and it's also not worth as much as you think. That's the dynamic of a first-time entrepreneur, even a second, sort of company. What you're selling yourself. When Harvey comes and says, "Hey, Ed T, here's a bunch of guys sitting around a table. Here's our company. Here's our deck." No matter what, you're selling yourself. You are part of the idea. You are part of the ecosystem that is your plan, that is your company. Whether you're the founder whose idea it was, or whether you're just someone that they brought on because you're part of the team. It's part of what we talked about, who's an entrepreneur. And a first-time entrepreneur, you just don't have the, not the experience, but the confidence that you should, because you're selling yourself. And I don't care who you are, whether you're on a first date, whether you're doing a presentation in class, it's still you. And you're thinking, wow, I'm selling me. Do these people really, am I that valuable? That's hard. That's just a hard thing. And by the way, take entrepreneurship. Let's shelve that for a second. Let's look at sales. When you're making a sales call, you're asking someone, no matter the industry, give me some money. And you're thinking, wow, I'm asking this person to give me money. And there's a part of you that's going, why is this person giving me money? And no matter who you are, no matter what walk of life you came from, that's hard. That's harder for 90% of people. Some people just have it. It's an innate quality that says, give me money, I'm Ed T. That's why you should give me money, because I'm Ed T. Right? I'm George Clooney. By God, you're going to give me money because I'm George Clooney. But when you're just starting and you are George Clooney circa 1980 and it's your first role that you're trying to get on TV, there's part of you that's going, why would they hire me? Right? When you go through a job interview, you know, Harvey, that you're an incredibly talented student. You're an incredibly diverse person. You know you have a lot of qualities. But with that first job interview, whether it's a Goldman Sachs internship or whether it's a CEO of a company, there's part of you that's going, why? They're going to give me money? They're going to give me a job? That makes it hard for a first-time entrepreneur to get in front of a room full of people that could be cold or warm and say, this is my idea, give me a bunch of money. So there is a skill set that comes with having done a few deals. And eventually you do realize that second company, that third company. That's sort of what Dylan was saying yesterday with the wine company, right? Not to digress to a specific example, but he says it's just me and my wife, and so we really uncomfortable going asking for people for money, even though we're making money. We just said, this is just us because we want to be entrepreneurs. The first time you have a pitch deck and you're presenting and you're asking someone that you don't know intimately, a VC firm, PE firm, not angel money, but a VC or a PE firm, hey, give me $2 million. I'm valuing Harvey Inc. at $8 million. And in your mind, you're going, do I really think this company's worth $8 million that I just started? That's what happens. That's a tough part about sort of the first time around, second time around. It gets easier. When you have success, like Dylan's had, it does get easier. You sort of have it in you that I've done it. But that's always something to think about when you're starting off. That's why I tell you guys in class, that idea you have, it's worth more than you think, and it's never worth as much as you think. It's somewhere in the middle is a really good sort of guiding force to have when you go in a room.
I think my initial reaction has always been to just start, have an idea, start, find people, build up over time. But the constant advice from my dad has always been a different one. He's not saying not to start, but it's always been a bit of like, go learn from people that know what they're talking about, gain credibility, go to great schools, work at great companies, and then people know you're awesome, and then you can leverage that over time. And I always kind of listen to that, and whether I think it's anyone's dad, you kind of listen to stuff with a pinch of salt, not because they could be freaking Bill Gates, and you'd still it's still just dad. But at the end of the day, I've kind of had this swaying thing, start an idea, gain credibility. And I was in a class the other day, and there's been this rise of TikTok, and one of my professors has 500,000 followers. And a lot of my videos are very motivational-esque, what have I learned, etc. You get these people in suits nowadays that are, walking around saying, oh, I learned this from this business deal, etc. And she gave me a really interesting point. She said, Harvey, what makes you credible to speak to the people that are watching your TikTok? Like, what makes you good enough to speak to them? And on the one hand, it's like, oh, whatever, just taking a jab at me. But on the other side, she actually has a good point. It's like, to actually educate someone about entrepreneurship, I feel like you've had to start a business. If you actually want to educate someone about the medical industry, you have to educate them. You have to, have become a doctor. And it's the same thing as what it sounds like with the world of entrepreneurship. Like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to get backing from investors, sure, you could just go into that the first time, and maybe you can fool an investor into backing you. But at the end of the day, do you know within yourself that you have the skills, you have the credibility, you have the connections, you have the financial backing, until you've worked at one of these other places or until you've failed a few times before? I don't know. And I think that's a really interesting scope to building yourself up, because even though you might not be working in your business straight away, you could be getting the skills, knowledge, experience, connections that will enable you to build the best business sustainably in the future.
Yeah, listen, that is 100% on point. What's one of the biggest, I won't say failings, Harvey, but one of the big things about academia, about universities, it's no matter what, it's 90% theoretical. Most professors do grad studies and then matriculate to be assistant professors and tenured professors, and we go to a lot of conferences and we help with a lot of dissertations. If you haven't done it in the entrepreneurial space, in the business space, there's a certain, I'd say, lack of sincerity. You have to close a deal. You have to start a company, in my opinion, to be a finance professor, to be an entrepreneurship professor. I know the I&E people well. And Ezra and Aaron, and those are people who've done businesses. Those are people who have watched their companies do well, do badly, had exits. That's a big part of what you come to learn from. And if all you've done is, some algorithms that say that the next recession is going to be this because here's what history tells us, that's not, to me, there's a certain secret sauce that's missing. I was a sports agent for 4 years with some top draft choices. Met a lot of key people in a lot of different leagues. That's why I teach sports business. I have bought companies, sold companies, run companies, done investment banking. That's what I try to bring to the classroom. It's not just let's go through the textbook. I don't know how many classes you're in, but everyone likes to do simulations now, right? Everything's a sim. Every week, let's do a sim. I'll grade you on the sim. I mean, that's we can all do that whenever we want. I want to add the insight to why that's a good sim to do, why it's important that we know this is an important exercise to do. There's a great, what I showed you last night in Moneyball. I love that movie. Yeah. It's a great sports business movie, and one of the great lines is when Brad Pitt, who's the GM, is talking to David Justice, this guy that he got as a free agent. David Justice says to him, I've never seen an organization run that way. And Brad Pitt says, yeah, because you've never had a GM run by a former player. That's how I feel about Duke. That's how I feel about teaching you guys. I'm giving you everything that I know about success and failure in the business world, in the sports world, because I've done it. I've seen it. It's not fake insight. It's not textbook insight. And we have good textbooks, but it's real insight as to this is what actually happens. This is why you have to model a worst case scenario for your business. And the reason you have to model a worst case scenario for your business is because I'm going to ask you what's the worst case scenario. When you sit down with a deck and the guy says, what are you projecting for your first year, right? I'm going to say, yeah, but what happens if? Those are the things I don't think you get just in a textbook. You get from that real life experience that a lot of us bring. And I've noticed, this is not platitudes. You got into Duke because you're the best of the best. I say that unequivocally. Duke kids have the best balance of any kids. Everyone talks about Stanford and Harvard and all those things, and I was lucky enough to get into a bunch of Ivies, but I still chose Duke. You are the best of the best. It's incredible the work that you guys do when I ask you to do it. I mean, it's just the most creative stuff. That's why I know when I give you that extra insight that you're going to take it and you're going to run with it. It's not going to be sort of an exercise. You're going to know that, wow, that's some good stuff to know when I want to start a company. And by the way, this is year 15 for me teaching at Duke. I really believe that's why 15 years on, I have kids from my first year who still reach out to me about, about some finance decisions, about some IPOs. From year one, they still reach out to me. And I encourage that. You know that because you know how I feel about you guys. But that's part of the relationship that Duke fosters. It's an incredible relationship between faculty and students, but in my classes in particular, I'm your resource for life. So I look at things that way.
Yeah, I can definitely second the point on the resource for life thing. I mean, even the student yesterday who's now no longer a student has been unbelievably successful. So that was a amazing insight into what someone's been able to accomplish from your class, but also their willingness to stay in touch. I find what you say with regard to the professors. And his wife, right?
Right.
His wife, right?
How can you beat that? Is that one of the best stories you ever heard?
That's awesome. That's awesome. But what I find about your point on the professors, I found that really fascinating. It's something I've always thought about is, if this person has never done the thing, how can you learn about how to do the thing from the person that's never done the thing? And I remember in high school, we'd be given these trading simulators, like, learn how to be a stock trader for a day. And they'd put us through all sorts of simulations. So made up like, the market's going down, the market's going up. And what I found is that every time, kids would make quadrillions because they wouldn't care about risk. They wouldn't care if they lost everything tomorrow, if they were $1 trillion in debt, if they made 4 quadrillion, whatever it was. And you'd get these kids, in theory, making huge amounts of money and losing huge amounts of money. And, it doesn't matter because I didn't lose in this thing. And over time, more are doing well than not. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what the implications are in the real world, and oftentimes the real world, it's not theory, right? There's stupid, fuck-ups that happen in every single circumstance of life. And I think without having that real-world experience, you can't possibly know what would happen. The second thing which I thought was interesting and is definitely something I've learned growing up from my parents is who to take information from. And in this world, this digital age in which we're, Gen Z is digitally native, a lot of the mentors and advisors that we would have had in, humans and professors and mentors and business leaders are now coming from online with these big creators talking about how to start a business, etc. And something I've always thought about is, if you actually had the secret sauce, if someone actually knew, here's how to make loads of money off stocks, here's this, why would they be sharing it online? And so there's this misnomer on social media in which people are getting their advice from fake gurus selling courses without a real bit of credibility. And I think that's a big part of this podcast, is to try and differentiate the bullshit from the actuality. I mean, even, huge podcasts are trying to swift through that. So that was kind of my response on those two things. I'm conscious of time, and so I wanted to move on to the topic of NIL. In, I think 2021, the concept of name, image, and likeness allowed college players who previously couldn't sell, if they had a branded jersey with, Ed T on the back. Previously, you wouldn't be able to sell that, but now you can with your own jerseys. You can get brand deals with companies, and it's also being used as a way by colleges to get athletes in, paying them millions of dollars through these sort of companies on the side that universities can use. You have had experience being the chairman of Legend Sports Group, working there for 4 years, as you mentioned, and working with some of the biggest names. Why do you think NIL is such a big thing, and how have you adapted your view of NIL, having taught students who were quite literally in the world of NIL?
Yeah, so let's frame it that, forget the NIL part, let's just talk about the death of amateur athletics, because that's what it is. So we had the O'Bannon case was decided in 2014-15, where you had someone say, hey, after I leave the school, how can you still use my name, image, and likeness? And that led to the first sort of chink in the armor of the NCAA. And I'll say this throughout, the NCAA, we talk about leadership in all classes. The NCAA just has bad leadership. So 2014, the O'Bannon case hits. Great. It's a great case study, by the way, that a guy is sitting there playing a video game in 2000 and I think 8 or 9, and he sees himself in a video game in a UCLA jersey and said, hey, I'm not in school anymore. How can they still use and he's playing himself. He goes, that's not right. So that starts the ball rolling. And then the Alston case is the bigger case that's saying, okay, what about athletes that are in college? How can they not make money if the university's making money? And then what you're talking about, so that led to 21. In July of 21, we started that first year, 900 million NIL revenue, projected to be 2 billion in 26. It's growing exponentially. But really it is the House settlement, which, I don't know if you know about it or not, but the House settlement is for people who, in between, right, between anyone who was an athlete and colleges made money off of them, what about them? And that's the big settlement. And that settlement says that all these schools in the NCAA are going to pay former athletes about 2 billion, and also going forward, universities can pay their athletes directly. They can pay their athletes about 20% of their athletic budget. And so there's a figure out there that Duke and all these schools will start paying currently directly to the athletes. You don't have to go get them a deal. About $20 million a year will go to current athletes. So frame that whole thing as the death of amateur athletics. And so the NCAA, who just keeps losing case after case after case after case, the NCAA just said, hey, we give up. Whatever. You guys do NIL. And so it's such a fluid landscape. It's almost hard to, it's kind of like Trump's tariffs. You just don't know next day what's going to be said about something, and you're like, how do we get ready for this? Where we are currently is, because of the House settlement, which is getting approved like any day, that's going to be direct payments for former athletes. Going forward, I think it's $22 million a year is what all these major schools are going to pay. The problem with is not that athletes shouldn't make money. If you know, it's my name, my image, my likeness, why can't I make money off of my name, image, and likeness? It's that we're headed to that sort of hyperbolic, okay, if one school wants to pay 20, like Duke, and they want to pay 12 million to the football team because that's the team that brings in the most revenue, and they want to pay 6 or 7 million to the basketball team because they bring in the second most revenue, what about all these other sports? And so you're going to see a lot of things happen, Harvey. You're going to see a lot of schools drop out of Division One because they just can't afford it. So you're going to see a lot of lawsuits on the backside of that with other sports saying, hey, it's supposed to be 50-50. It's in Duke's case, 53-47 because of the population of Duke. That's why this is so fluid. Again, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage here that while it's sexy to say, hey, you know, let's let these athletes make a lot of money, you're going to end up with 2 or 3 conferences that are going to get all the talent. And that was sort of the soapbox that I was on, that the Jay Billises of the world don't agree with, where I'm going to tie this all together, believe it or not, where you see this sort of new world order where schools like Tennessee and Auburn are going to have a ton of money because they're not going to be checked as to how much they can raise. Yes, the school can pay them 25 million bucks, but donors can give them even more. And if the conference doesn't say, here's the limit, here's the salary cap, then where do you think the talent's going to go? You're not going to see these smaller schools compete in the Final Four. And that's tough. That's tough to see, that you're going to end up with, you know, just a few schools every year. No one's going to outspend Alabama football, Tennessee football, even Duke. Duke's not going to outspend those schools. So there's going to be this kind of talent pool that's going to drift to the highest schools. I'm seeing already, I know at Duke, I won't name names, but I know kids who have agents in high school for NIL money who are making, when they come to Duke, before they get to their first EdT class, I know they're already making $2 or $3 million a year through NIL, and they have an agent. That's kind of the death of amateur athletics. That's the end of the NCAA. That's the secular change that's happening, that some people like it, some people don't. I will say this, to tie it all together. You know, Jay Billis's approach is, it's a free market. Let the free market dictate. Harvey and Ed know there's no such thing as a free market. It's never existed. We have the SEC. You can't do insider trading. You can't, there's a lot of things you can't do because it's never a free market. The idea of a free market's great in Keynesian economics. The reality of it is there is no free market. And if you don't have guardrails, if you don't have sort of top-down approach, and if the NCAA is basically jettisoning their leadership role, it's going to be the Wild West. But I do know the end result is every year there'll be about 10 to 12 schools competing for the National Football Championship, and there'll be about 25 schools competing for the National Basketball Championship. And that's, maybe some people love it, but that's the world that we're headed to.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was even less, to be honest. I mean,
Agreed.
You sort of get that, a lot of donations in for one school that's going to go on and on and on. And even though Duke has, got that amazing legacy, 5 national championships, Coach K legacy, I think if you're being offered $1 million versus 10 million or something in a period of time with a guy like Cooper Flagg, I don't know whether that's the deal breaker, but we'll see. I've got 3 final quick questions.
Sure.
The first one being, if I was to ask someone in 100 years' time, what would you want your legacy to be and how would you want to be described?
My legacy is very simple, and I'll do it from the teaching perspective, because, I lost my dad in February. He was someone that truly loved interacting with the students, and I love interacting with the students. I love giving my students some wisdom, some things that I know, but being a comfort and an asset to them. Dad was always that way. It's exactly that. That would be my legacy. That he was an instructor who cared. That would be my legacy.
And what's next for you? You can choose any scope of time that you want.
I think the next for me will be continuing the education route, because I do love teaching you guys. It would also be, because of the research that I've done, it will be owning part of a professional team pretty soon. I know that's next for me. I'll be owning part of a professional team very soon.
Any league? Any hints? Which league?
No, I can't give you that because it's kind of, remember, no free markets. I can't give you insider info, Harvey. Sorry.
If you wanna just give me I don't know, 1 share in that team, that'd be cool. But no pressure.
You'll definitely get some merch. I know that. I can get you some merch.
All right, I'll take the merch. And my final question, and I ask this to every guest on Personable, is what is one thing that you would want a listener to take away from this episode?
Oh, boy. Because we covered so many different fields. I would say the one thing would be the need, the desire to keep the academic setting a place where students have the ability to pick up real knowledge. For us to justify standing in front of Harvey every week with our pearls of wisdom, but to justify that knowledge sharing, that would be my one thing, is that we are teachers, and we need to teach, and you need to learn, and that's why this relationship is so great.
Thank you. I feel like in the world there are so many facts, opinions, ways of doing things, and people think that AI is the solution because it can do the things that we do in a quicker way, but it lacks emotion, it lacks creativity, and it's only based on previous sets of knowledge and lacks the human imagination to think of new things. And I really enjoyed speaking to you today, and I've not only enjoyed having you as a professor, but it's really given me a scope to think of that in this world of entrepreneurship, in this world of life, and whatever we do, from relationships to sports to fitness and health to building a business, is that we're actually building up ourselves. And even from the scope of an entrepreneur to the investor, if there's one thing you can take away, it's know that if you become the best version of yourself, if you know that the product you're building is something that you can carry through, and you can not only convince investors, but show yourself and show the people that are backing you that you are able to follow through with that product, that you will do amazing things and amazing people will follow you on the journey. I feel like I've learned a lot about entrepreneurship, what it takes to be an investor, the transition from Wall Street to entrepreneurship, as well as what it takes to be a great professor. So thank you so much for your time, Ed T. I look forward to you giving me 1 share of your sports team, and I'll see you in class.
You got it, Harvey. This is a great way to get extra credit. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro.